right, so there's a little bit of QC that happens before this actually goes onto the chassis.
Onto the chassis, and not just a little bit, actually, it's very thorough. So circuit boards have come out of the wave solder machine, they've been washed, and these fine folks go through and do the amazing, tedious task of going over the circuit board, top and bottom, making sure that all of the solder joints are correct. So they'll do whatever amount of touch-up seems like needs to be done, and they will go through and make sure that the polarity of the components is good. They'll pull on all the wires, make sure they're solidly connected. They go through the entire circuit board. Basically, before it gets put into a chassis, it's much easier to look at and dial in here than it is once it's in the chassis. So they do a very good job of making sure that this circuit board is ready to become an amplifier. The only two things that we don't do in-house is we don't etch the circuit boards and we don't punch the chassis metal. We have a number of local metal manufacturers that punch the chassis metal for the potholes and the jacks and the switches and the knobs and the transformer mounts and all that stuff. So we get a finished chassis from the manufacturer, and they're nice and wrapped up like this. And we'll have our guys go through and take it out of its nice little packaging there. Before they do anything, they inspect it to make sure that the screen printing is perfect. This is an area where it's important for the amp to be 100% in the screen printing process. We particularly go for a lot of fancier finishes. We want, the stuff's got to sound good, but at the end of the day, we want it to look good too. So this is an important part. And so before the guy will start to install any of the parts, he does a thorough inspection to make sure that all the screen printing and everything looks good, no blemishes, no nothing there.
So this first stage, we're talking amp chassis, transformers.
That's correct. This is where the circuit board comes from. Auto insert, uniform, non-uniform components, and then ultimately the wave solder machine. This is where the circuit board meets with the actual chassis, which will become an amp. Another point is the chassis construction and ultimately the material. This is a very heavy-duty 14-gauge aluminum, I believe, and also you have the folded edges and the welded joints here.
Say, that's a nice weld.
Many chassis are just a U-shaped chassis, which doesn't have the side supports, doesn't have the welds, doesn't have the foldovers, and all of that stuff is what will have your amplifier still working after you drop it off the back of your 412 at the gig, right? You get a little golden moment, you lean a little too far back, the amp goes over. There's a great chance that you're going to be able to pick your amp back up and just plug it right back in and make it work, and this integrity is one of those things. Want to start with that one? We're all done. Thanks, mate. Here you can see he's doing the inspection. We did a little pre-inspection. He will begin to install the components on the underside. So we've got transformers that have been installed. You can see the IEC power jack, cage nuts. Here we have what looks to be an output transformer going in. And so they're going to go ahead and finish up the bottom side of the chassis, having all of its components installed. And when he gets done with that, it moves to the next station where you can see we have knobs being installed after the pots have been installed. And that area is also where the circuit board meets the chassis for the first time. So he's gone through and checked all the modes, turned all the knobs, dialed up a wave on the scope and also through the speaker, as you can hear now. Going through and checking some of the stuff from microphonics. A few different special test points. But then we come to the hammer test.
So the hammer test, he basically fires it up, dials up a wave, so we're hearing the signal, and he bangs on it with a hammer.
That's right, all throughout the whole entire chassis. And the point is to, if the amplifier is going to fail, it's going to fail here. And so these guys go through and hammer on every amplifier with full signal through the scope and through the speaker. They're looking to see if the signal changes on the scope or if it changes, if it blinks through the speaker. And they're basically, once again, trying to simulate that fall off the back of your 412 in that golden moment and make sure that the amp can take the punishment, basically. So as we're watching here, the hammer test has caused something to cut out, and that will cause the technician to go in and figure out what's going on and dial it in and give it another hammer test to make sure that it works. Every amplifier gets the hammer test, and actually one of the telltale signs is, see, I think the handles around here last about 1.5 years or something like that. Yeah, here's a dead soldier to the hammer test, you know. Yeah, this is twice for this.
Beat the hell out of these things.
Yeah, the amps and the hammers, exactly. And the other point is that the tubes as well, once you go through and you beat on the chassis itself and try and make the amp blink, the tubes also get tapped and dinged and basically put through a lot more torture than they're likely to see out in the field once they're out there being played rock and roll.
So if they can survive this, as far as shipping and going to and from the gigs, they're golden.
They'll go through a few other actual play tests in addition to this, but that's exactly the point. If they can make it through this, then they're ready to serve well in the world of rock and roll.
All right, let's talk about quality control. Looks like we got a tag here. People sign off when they check stuff. Huh?
That is correct. After it's past the little tech stage that we just witnessed, the techs will go ahead and sign off and basically saying, yeah, I checked this amp out, I ran it through all its paces, and it's ready to move on to the next step, which is what we refer to as pretest. So techs have looked at the amplifier, and what we want to do next is have an actual guitar player play through the amp, or bass player in the case of a bass amp, and make sure that what the tech saw on the scope is what a guitar player actually wants to hear in his ears. So. Mr. Kevin Robertson here, longtime Boogie employee and playtest guru. So what he's doing is just what the text just did. He is playing through every mode, every channel, turning every knob, flipping every switch, and basically making sure that what was, again, checked on a scope is what a guitar player actually wants to hear in their ears. And there are a lot of people that say, wow, I want to be a play tester at Mesa Boogie. That sounds like a great job. And it is a great job.
He's smiling. He's loving this.
But there's also a lot of knob turning and a lot of switch flipping. So it's not just a guy sitting around playing guitar all day necessarily, but actually these guys get away with murder. They do play guitar all day.
So they've been tested now. Tubes are in, obviously. Tube caps aren't quite in yet, but what's happening here?
Well, we've got our passer, we've got our goer that Kevin just made, and he's probably played through all these as well. And essentially what we have here is a 24-hour burn-in. They've passed pre-test, and we go ahead and plug them in overnight. And what's expected here is that they're going to get to probably their hottest point of usage by being plugged in and turned on overnight, and we're hoping to see that if there's any last weak links that couldn't have been hammer tested or pre-tested out, that they'll show themselves here. The other thing we're trying to do is we're trying to turn the amps on and off as many times before they leave the factory, because ultimately, for tube amps especially, many of the actual tube failures will happen just like a light bulb when you're flipping the switch and putting the initial voltage to the tubes, and when the tube is cold. So we're trying to, for the sake of the tubes and just in general for troubleshooting and working them through the paces, trying to make it so that we're turning them on and off as many times as we can. They burn in overnight. Technicians come in the morning and connect the amps to a cab, turn it up, listen for any microphonics, seeing if the tubes have changed before they get shut down. And then the chassis, after it's been turned off, after it's burning, gets plugged into a cabinet 15-20 minutes later and rolls into what we affectionately refer to as the bubble.